Hey everyone, it's 1 p.m. It's time to start. First of all, I would like to thank Better Team for the invitation, and I'm very pleased to be here today and to talk regarding about healthy relationship with food and type 1 diabetes. Is it possible? That's a really interesting question, and I will try to answer to this question with you this afternoon. So, first of all, just my conflict of interest first. I perceived honoraria from different industrial company that have some medication in obesity or binge eating disorder. For instance, Bosch Health, Takeda Canada, or Novo Nordisk. And I also perceived research funding from Diabetes Canada, and that's why I am here today, as well as some governmental institution. I will be very pleased to answer any of your questions at the end of the webinar. Please use the Q&A instead of the chat box. It will be a real pleasure for me to understand at the end of the webinar. First of all, as you may have heard, I'm not really an English speaker. I'm from France, and as most of the French people, I do not really learn well how to speak English. So if my English lack of precision, if you do not understand me well, just please do not hesitate to ask for more clarification. I will be pleased to address any clarification needed. So I'm a psychiatrist, and I specialized in eating disorder, obesity, and bariatric surgery regarding my clinical practice. And since a few years, I'm now an assistant professor at the Department of Psychiatry and Neuroscience at Laval University here in Quebec. And as a researcher, my main topic of interest are eating behaviors from normal to pathologic behavior, and especially binge eating disorder. I'm studying this eating disorder through cognition impairment, and especially in obesity and type 1 diabetes. On the menu today, we will try to define why do we eat? It seems like a very simple question, but truly it's much more complicated. So why do we eat? And then we will focus on what is an eating disorder and what can we do to face such a disease. So why do we eat? And this is especially relevant in type 1 diabetes, because what you've probably learned so far is that eating is like to feed yourself, is to get to take nutriment inside your body in order to get some gas in your car. It's to be able to perform all day long. You need some energy, you need some calories. But if some of yours are car fan or are really taking care of their car, you will know that not all gasolines are equal. And if you want to keep your motor longer, you will have to choose better gasoline. And more than quantitative aspect, qualitative aspect regarding food is very important. And nowadays we are very concerned regarding, for instance, organic food. It's better for our health, etc., etc. But do you know that quality also matter regarding your well-being, your mental health? And this study was published very recently, and I found this study very interesting because they give some different type of food to rats, some control food that mean typical food, and some cafeteria-like food, which is some food with higher rates of sugar and fat, and also varied cafeteria food with all ultra-processed food inside, like marshmallows, sausage, cookies, bacon, etc., etc. And what the author did is that after 10 days, we are only speaking of 10 days, they did some behavioral tasks, and they assess the level of anxiety behaviors and what they observed, and this is very I found fascinating, is that the rights that that was exposed to cafeteria food did present higher rate of anxiety behavior. So this rate was liking more than anxious person. You know, the type of food, a diet rich in fat and sugar, will induces in the short term very anxiety-like behavior in rats. So the quality also matter for your brain and your mental health. Another study that I found very relevant when we speak about the type of food and the food consumption is that the context also matter. And in this study, the authors asked normal weight women to solve an unsolvable equation, and this task aimed to generate some stress in the participant, you know, just cognitive stress. And what they observed is that participants that faced some unsolvable equation have an increased energy intake. They ate more, but this was done in the complete absence of hunger. This means that participants do eat more calorie, even if they do not have any hunger sensation. So what they also observed is that this increase in energy intake happened in a context of a decrease, in the context of decreasing sensitivity to reward. And this is really important. That means that participants with a cognitive load didn't perceive any sensation of pleasure while they were eating. And this conduct me to talk to you about a second important function of eating, which is to enjoy. And it's very important to notice that eating without enjoyment, without pleasure, will be very, very complicated. And we won't eat if we do not have any pleasure while we are eating. And this takes place in our brain in the reward system. The reward system is like the systems that bring us to survive through thousands and thousands of years. To better illustrate my purpose, you know, if you have to hunt or pick up some vegetables or hunt some deer in a long and frozen winter, you will have to enjoy to know that you will be rewarded from your hunt at hand. So your brain needs to generate some motivation, some pleasure to the idea of hunting and to anticipate such an action. So your brain will increase your willing to your motivation to. And if this reward system, this survival system was already relevant 2,000 years ago, what happened today? You know, today food is everywhere. You're gonna encounter food everywhere. So if the system were really performant when food was almost nowhere, today it has been hypothesized that such a reward system in front of such a rich environment in food will contribute to obesity pandemic. But when we are looking for some information on the link between brain and reward system and type 1 diabetes, there is really no studies or almost no studies. And this is very strange. This appeared very strange to me, you know, because when your motivation to eat depends on your blood glucose regulation, your insulin intake, injection, you know, your motivation just seems to change a lot. And surely, probably, it may impact your brain reward system, but we have no cue on what happened on this system. And this is a real lake, but sure, an action is an impairment may occur. So this is food and pleasure. Another important function of eating is to share. And maybe you have never thought of that before, but sharing, while we're speaking of eating, is very important. You will share a part of your culture, you will share with friends, you will share your emotion, you will share a lot of things around a meal. And Levi-Strauss, who was an anthropologist, says that the cuisine of a society is a language in which it unconsciously translates its structure. This can appear very complex, but indeed it's really simple. You know, the transition from raw food to cooked food characterize the emergence of humanity. That's what Levi-Strauss said. This means that when you need to cook your food for transforming this food in a more digestible thing, you will cook it, and during the time your meal is cooking, you will sit around the fire and share with your neighbor, share any information, share all what you need, share all what you think, and you are creating the culture and the society. That's Levi-Strauss' hypothesis. And he also said that the more food is subjected to long and complex preparations, the more it undergoes a cultural influence. And for instance, when you are a good host, you will take longer time to prepare any meals, any food for your guests, you know, and the longer you're working on your meal, on your menu, the best host you will be. It's like an implicit association, and this is really important because this means that all your cultural aspect, all your willing to be good for the other, to appear good at the face of the world, may go through the way you are cooking. So then culture will become as a food guide. And for instance, not everything that is biologically incorporable is culturally edible. For instance, are you going to eat some mealworms? It's not in our education, in our culture, but it could be in part of other culture. And your pets, you know, your pets are biological comestible. You can eat your pets, sorry. They're just protein and fat, you know, but you won't. Because your culture is like mandatory over your need, and you won't eat your pets. But in diabetes, what's happened? You know, your culture is a food guide, as I mentioned, but in diabetes, the influence of the medical culture will go through your one culture, your one belief, and will modify them. What I mean by this example is, as you may know, in medicine, we are very concerned regarding the level of precision, the accuracy of what we are doing, of what we are assessing, and on what we are prescribing. But, you know, this is our culture, and we will transfer this aspect to our patients when we are educating them to the food recommendations, the food guideline in diabetes. But are we really fair? Is it really true that patient must count all the glucide of the carb, with a high precision? We do not exactly know. The level of evidence in the scientific literature is not so high regarding such aspect. So in diabetes, our cultural guide seems impaired, and in consequences, people living with type 1 diabetes will try to identify themselves to other with the same way of thinking, the same culture regarding their food intake. Again, for instance, some will go in a low carb diet, or other will go in very strict carb counting. Other will be more flexible in the way they deal between the food and the diabetes. So you will try to assimilate yourself to this group and to become part of a group of patients, and you will like create a new culture regarding your food choice. So as we see, it's to feed, to enjoy, to share. And another important aspect is to experiment. So what does it mean? When you grow, you will grow in an educational environment. And, when you're young, the accessibility, the cost of food will really varied regarding the environment, the family where you are rising up. Food diversity, some family are very narrow focusing, narrow interest on food and will mostly eat pasta, while other family will try to have a higher degrees of diversity, food diversity. Some families will always eat at home, while other will frequently go outside. The parenting style of eating will conduct to modify, to present you a model of eater and to become this type of eaters when you will be an adult. So social and cultural norms are very important in the development of the future eater you have, future type of eater you will be. And this conduct child to develop habits regarding their eating, some routine. For instance, snacking, for some families, snacking is completely forbidden, is a devil, you shouldn't snack, don't snack. While in other families, snacking is just usual, normal, and when you go back from school, you will snack, and then during the movies evening, you will snack, etc., etc. And this will become your habits. This becomes your habits. And which is very interesting is that depending on the level of diversity, the level of example you had when you was a child, you will be more flexible, more with a higher level of adaptation later when you will be an adult, and your ability to cope with a new type of diet will depend on the way you grew up, where you have been educated, you were educated, sorry. So in type 1 diabetes, food diversity is decreasing while you're children. It's very hard to get some lot of various collation. Parents reduces the numbers of collation available. You are not going outside often because eating in a restaurant is really complicated when you're suffering from a diabetes, and you do not have any behavioral model. Your parents are already suffering from diabetes too, so you do not have any model to deal with, to grow yourself from. So your routine will be higher, your habits will be higher, and you will decrease your flexibility and adaptability for future changes. So to experiment and to keep a high level of experimentation of diversity for all children or child with diabetes is very important. Another function of eating and function that I do really love and I'm particularly careful with is to cope with emotion. As a psychiatrist is very relevant for me, and to cope with emotion is most of the time, I think, not understand as it should be. And long story short, eating your emotion is good and should be kept. And when you have a pleasant day, when everything is good and enjoyable, you will share and you will hear something very pleasant with your close one, and it's good. It's very relevant to do so. But when you're sad, eating more high-fat, high-carb food is also very important because food will act as the same biological level as an emotion and will help to cope with your emotions. So this is really important to keep this mechanism of coping. But what we usually understand by emotional eating is the fact that to face a small emotion, you will lose control over your food consumption and eat more and more and binge. and binge eating. And this is a dangerous way to cope with your emotion, because you are losing the congruency between the importance of the emotion and the amount of food you are consuming. So you need to work on having a better congruency between the intensity of the emotion and the type and the amount of food you are taking. But in type 1 diabetes, most of the time, hypoglycemia will have overlapping symptoms with emotion. You know, emotion and hypoglycemia may feel the same and come together when you are experimenting hypoglycemia. I'm sure you have already noticed that you are more irritable, you are more prone to get intense emotion. And you will sweat, you will shake, and this can also be part of your emotion at this time. And most of the time when you are experimenting, when you experience an hypoglycemia, you will take carb in order to correct your hypoglycemia. But you know, it's never enough. You're not sure to do the good correction, to take enough carb. So you start feeling like inefficiency, not good enough. And this is going to increase. This increased your level of stress, and stress is secreting cortisol. Cortisol will increase your glycemia, and you will go hyperglycemia. This is going to make you feel like you are losing control over your blood sugar level, and you feel like in this vicious circle, you know. So emotion and food intake are very intimate, related, and can impair each other. So what can we do to improve our healthy eating in type 1 diabetes? You know, I think first of all is just to consider that eating is not only to feed yourself. Eating implies much more functions, much more complex aspects, and we are going to work in how to cope with my emotions, how to share, to better share, to keep sharing while I'm eating over the injunction of type 1 diabetes. Or I can still enjoy eating and still enjoy to share my meal with others while I have to constantly focus on my carbs count. Or I can keep experimenting different type of food, different type of restaurants, while it's such complicated to estimate, to have an idea of how many insulin should I inject after a meal. You know, so we are going in psychotherapy to work on all these aspects in order to just trying to get a better and healthier relation to food. So sometimes all this aspect of all will be impaired at a level that lead to developed eating disorder. But what is an eating disorder? We usually consider eating disorder as a spectrum of difficulties coming from restriction on one side to disinhibition on the other side. Restriction is like anorexia nervosa, bulimia, or orthorexia, and I will speak of that later. And disinhibition at the other hand will be like snacking, grazing, binge eating disorder, or compulsive eating. So regarding the etiology of eating disorder, most of the time we consider that eating disorder are coming from the internalization of social pressure. What does that mean? You know, the stigmatization, the social pressure regarding our body is so high that we finish by to consider that we should be what the society is expecting of us, and to become as good, as beautiful as the society wants us to be, and we will internalize such stigmatization, such stereotypes. This leads to higher body dissatisfaction, and when I feel myself not good enough, I feel my body is not good enough, I will restrain from eating, I will experiment negative emotions, and cognitive restraint, cognitive food restriction as well as negative emotion will lead to increase my binge eating episode, to increase my level of food intake. And this is the vicious circle that is at the beginning of eating disorder. So another way to think about the restriction is just to consider that when I restrain myself from eating, this leads to caloric deprivation and frustration. You know, I'm not eating enough. I feel like frustrated from not eating enough, and caloric deprivation as well as frustration will trigger binge eating. And as soon as I binged, I asked myself, okay, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that, and try to compensate from my excess intake. And I will start again to restrain myself, induce caloric deprivation, etc., etc. And which is, I would say very funny, but I'm not sure that funny is a good term, is that most of the time when we are starting cognitive behavioral therapy with patients with binge eating disorder, we will teach them that they should eat more in order to eat less. And this can appear like a paradox, you know, but it's because we ask patients to eat very regularly, every 4 or 5 hours, a normal meal, and this will decrease the caloric deprivation and the frustration, and this will lead to less binge eating episode. So to eat less, just start by eating more. Just start to eat more. The main eating disorder usually are anorexia nervosa, which is like to restrain yourself from eating, and behind that, the aim is to decrease your weight. You're not underweight enough. You will try to get lower and lower weight. But in anorexia nervosa, you can have some binge eating episode, and you can also have some compensatory purgative symptom like vomiting, laxative, taking laxative, diuretics, or hyper-exercising. Another eating disorder is bulimia nervosa, which is kind of different. You know, in bulimia nervosa, you will have binge eating episode, but the binge eating is aimed to make you suffer. You know, you want to just hurt yourself by eating so much, and then you will try to control the weight you may gain by compensatory strategy like vomiting or taking laxative or diuretics. So you will develop some weight control strategies, but usually the weight is normal or right above the normal weights. And the last eating disorder is binge eating disorder. In binge eating disorder, patients have binge eating episode with a loss of control over the amount of food they are consuming. So they eat large quantity, but the core symptom of binge eating disorder is a distress that occur after the binge eating episode. You feel guilt, you feel shame, and you will depress yourself and you will experience a high level of emotional distress. In binge eating, you can also have some kind of food craving. Food craving is really the same craving that you will experience with alcohol or cocaine, and this implies a reward system we spoke of a little bit earlier. And as in binge eating disorder, there is no compensatory behavior. Weight will most of the time increase. So in type 1 diabetes, which is very important to consider, is that there is a lot of risk factor for eating disorder due to type 1 diabetes. For instance, carbohydrate counting, over-perfectionism control, also all this nutritional introduction, sometimes contradictory information. Also, most of the time, the diagnostic of type 1 diabetes occurred when you're a child or an adolescent, or when you're vulnerable. Also, when the disease occurs, most of the time, the hyperglycemia will induced ketoacidosis will decrease your weight, and then when you're treated with insulin, you will gain a lot of weight very soon. And this loose gain is very hard for the brain and can trigger some eating disorder. So in type 1 diabetes, we have a lot of risk factor for high eating disorder, and one of the specific eating disorder of diabetes is what we call diabulimia. Diabulimia is a kind of insulin restriction, behavior of insulin restriction to promote weight loss. You are taking less insulin than you should in order to decrease your weight or not to gain weight. And how does this work? Omitting insulin will decrease the entry of glucose into the cells, which will bring your body to take fat or protein in order to have some energy, and your glucose is going through your urine, so you will lose weight. But it's kind of very dangerous way to deal with your weight, because this is going to induce some high rate of complication and a high glycated hemoglobin, HbA1c, sorry. This will also conduct to more psychic distress, isolation, and also higher rate of psychiatric comorbidities. So those will lead to higher mortality rate, and you can die from such a disease. It's a very dangerous one. And is it really a prevalent eating disorder, diabulimia? And we look at the data from the Better Registry with 2,000 participants, and we just focus on the participants that say yes to the question, have you ever intentionally omitted insulin to lose weight? And what we found is that almost 6% of the overall population have already intentionally omitted insulin to lose weight, and that it's around 8% for women and 2% for male. What we also observed is that omitted insulin was associated with a higher rate of diabetes trace, but also already higher glycated hemoglobin. And 45% of respondents have an glycated hemoglobin over 8, and it's almost around 20 or 25% that had an glycated hemoglobin around over 9. So, this disease led to really high level of glycated hemoglobin and of complications. Another very relevant and eating disorder or emerging eating disorder in type 1 diabetes is orthorexia. Orthorexia comes from orthorexia nervosa, ortho-right, orexia appetite, and in orthorexia nervosa, people will have strong preoccupation with eating behaviors, resulting in rigid and inflexible rules regarding the way they eat, the type of food they eat, and moreover, the compliance with dietary rules has an excessively high influence on self-esteem. I will define myself regarding my level of accuracy to the rule I created. And the consequences are a high level of emotional distress, anxiety, concentration impairments, and guilt due to the inability to eat healthy. The prevalence of orthorexia nervosa in the general population is estimated from 1 to 7%. And of interest, we can notice that both men and women are equally affected by orthorexia nervosa. In type 1 diabetes, the prevalence will increase so much. It has been estimated that around 13% of adults will have orthorexia nervosa, and up to 81% in children and adolescents. You know, it's very high rate. And what we don't know exactly is if this high rate of orthorexia nervosa is really damaging a patient life and decreasing quality of life. Because in some aspect, orthorexia may be some kind of necessary to deal with the injunction from medicine to diabetes. You know, you need to be able to focus on some rules, to respect some rules, to be compliant with some rules in order to deal with your diabetes. But you know, when does this become when does this become some kind of difficulty for you? Sorry. So we developed in my laboratory an experiment in order to determine if this classification in healthy or not healthy is leading to some stress or to some difficulties. And, you know, most of the time when we're speaking of orthorexia, we based ourselves on self-assessment questionnaires that patients just fill by themselves, but we do not have objective measurement of orthorexia nervosa. So we develop the task, and it's a very easy one. Patient have just to answer if the avocado is good or not for my health. Yes, no. Is the cookies bad for my health? Yes, no. And what we try to determine is, oh, well, can you detect which food is good or not for you? Is orthorexia nervosa declared reflecting in the way you categorize your food items? And also what we try to analyze if depending on the perceived risk to one's health, is it possible to observe a tendency to classify food more as unhealthy or more as healthy? You know, our participants with orthorexia nervosa presenting some type of particular classification for food items. This is just like an overlook of eating disorder, especially in type 1 diabetes. But now, what can I do if I'm suffering from diabetes? You know, the first is to just talk about it, please. And you can just go through this very simple and easy test. 5 questions, 6 questions regarding eating disorder. Do you make yourself sick because you feel uncomfortably full? Do you worry that you have lost control over how much you eat? Have you recently lost more than 1 stone, 14 pounds in a 3-month period? Do you believe yourself to be fat when others say you are too thin? And would you say that food dominates your life? So the question, the 5 B's is, do you ever take less insulin than you need? And this one is especially for type 1 diabetes. You know, if you have 2 or more positive answer, just go. You may have a higher risk of eating disorder. Just speak of that with your physician, with your healthcare provider, or your close one. You know, don't say alone. And taboo and shame are common experiences that lead to significant diagnostic delays. You know, sometimes it's like 3 or 5 years before someone feel comfortable enough to speak of the disease, you know, but no, it's too late. Just, it is important to overcome the silence and to have the courage to talk about it to the health professional or to your close one. Please never hesitate to speak of your eating disorder or your suspicion or your feeling regarding your eating. Another way to deal to increase your healthy habits regarding it, just to work on the other function of eating, try to restore them. And if you want just an interesting way to deal with food insecurity, food impairment, eating impairment, it is intuitive eating. And there is this fantastic webinar from Claudia Hall that is available on the Better platform, Intuitive Eating and Type 1 Diabetes. Just listen to this, it's very interesting. Another Ressources website is the NEDIC, National Eating Disorder Information Center. Here's the website address, nedic.org. need it, Kinetic, and you will find a lot of information, very interesting information there. For those who are living in Quebec, HANEB is offering a lot of service and help for people living with eating disorder. And here are some self-help resources that you can just start reading to help yourself, you know. There is this book on intuitive eating, but also the eating disorder source book, or 8 Keys to Recovery from an Eating Disorder. Also, this book from Fairburn that is Overcoming Binge Eating Disorder, which is very interesting. So maybe this can help you to just understand that you're not alone and that you can do something for improving the way you are living with your eating impairment or your eating behaviors. I really thank you for your attention. And if you have any question, I will be pleased to answer to any of them. Do not hesitate to ask in the Q&A. Right? And I'm really sorry for my English, and I hope I have been understandable by you. And do not hesitate if you need any clarification. Okay, I'm just trying to remember the question in French a little bit earlier, but one of the questions they asked was, if you remember the rats and the type of food, the rat anxiety level increase, was it due to just the change in food habits or due to the food by itself, the type of food by itself? And, you know, there is a lot of studies that shown that it's a type of food and the level of fat and sugar in the food that will impair the brain system and the way the brain is dealing with our stress and our anxiety. Thank you very much for the comment on my English. And I'm very pleased you understand me. You understand me. But honestly, if you have no question, just let me just say that honestly, if you are experimenting, if you're suffering from your relationship to food, just please speak to any healthcare provider. And if they do not have any answer to give you, they will try to find some more answers. And this is very important. Don't stay alone with such distress. It's really important. Well, if there is any more question, I will close the webinar, and thank you again for having been here with me today, and really thank you so much. And again, let's talk about it. Thank you so much.